Should we scrap the digital ID plan? Get your calls in for this one now. By 2029, all adults will be required to have a digital ID card to get a job. It could also be extended to things like claiming benefits, getting a driver's licence, or even booking childcare. But one of the government's own advisors says that the plan could make our so-called two-tier society even worse. Older and vulnerable Brits might not have a smartphone or even access to the internet, cutting them off from key services. Michael, what do you make of digital ID cards?
I have mixed feelings about them. There's lots of concerns about sort of a big brother society, and this will give the state far too much power, and it will look a bit like 1984, obviously the book by George Orwell. Now, I look at all the other countries that have mandatory ID, and they don't look that bad, right? So most European countries have some form of mandatory ID, and the sky hasn't fallen in, and sometimes it makes their life more convenient. So I also give so much information already to Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg, and to be frank, I actually trust the British government more than I do these Silicon Valley tech bosses. My issue with it is I have a real problem with smartphones. I think they're melting our brains. I think they're stealing our attention.
In what capacity? Just the amount of information that's on them?
No, not so much the amount of information. The amount that they are all designed that the moment I look at my screen, oh, I've got an Instagram update. Oh, I've got an update on Twitter. I don't want to look at my screen any more than I am currently looking at it. So if I have to show my ID at various points in the day, or if I want to leave my smartphone at home. I know lots of people who are moving to what's called a dumb phone, which is a phone that just does what a phone used to do. And so if this makes it mandatory for people to have a smartphone in their pocket, I'm against it.
All right, what do you think, Alys?
I agree with that. I don't have sort of privacy concerns. I agree with Michael that we voluntarily give so much of our data away. I do have concerns about this. Is essentially the state mandating you to have a smartphone, which I'm a bit uncomfortable with. I do worry about the capacity of the state to roll this out in an effective way. I mean, we've seen these massive cyber attacks recently. There was a huge one on M&S, huge one on Jaguar Land Rover, which can really cripple a society. So I do worry about that. But ultimately, look, if this can increase our productivity, if it can make more streamlined access to public services, and crucially, if it can help us tackle illegal migration, then I think we should support it. Let's make sure we do it in the right way, but let's not scrap it altogether.
But hold on, we have a choice at the moment, Michael, to have a smartphone. You have a choice. Crucially, this would not be a choice on the amount of information that you're giving to the government. You have a choice to give your information to Apple or whoever it is your phone's with. We're missing that here.
Well, I mean, you already have a national insurance number. I mean, it depends how much data you give to the government. I mean, what I think they have to do is also have a physical card. So you have to be able to choose between having a digital ID or a physical card. Obviously, your information will still be on some central database. Which
would then help the vulnerable and older people that may not have as easy access to the internet. Don't go anywhere because we're taking your calls on this after the break. Would you be happy to use a digital ID card? We'll also be speaking to a campaigner from Liberty Human Rights Group. Are you worried? They're worried about digital exclusion. 0207 862 2222 is the number, and we'll see you right after this. Before the break, we asked which colour ball is worth 5 points in a game of snooker, and the answer is blue. Welcome back. We are live on 5. Michael and Alys still here with me. Don't forget, later we are asking if people should be allowed to claim the state pension crucially early. How would you feel about getting yours in your maybe early 60s? But now we're going back to our discussion about digital ID cards, and let's now speak to Ruth Ehrlich, Head of Policy and Campaigns at Liberty Human Rights Group. Ruth, you have been campaigning against mandated digital cards. Why?
So thank you so much for having me on. We at Liberty do feel quite sceptical of the government's plans to introduce digital ID, not least because in the month since this has been announced, we've heard different variations about which social problem it's meant to solve, whether or not it's going to be mandatory or opt-in. And frankly, the messages have been extremely mixed. And we feel really sceptical of touting digital ID as a solution, as a kind of silver bullet to the things that the government has been talking about, because with it comes significant risks. So the government has just said that it's not going to be a mandatory system, but actually when you drill down into that detail, it will be mandatory for anyone who, for example, is looking to get a new job. Now, there are over 37 million working adults of working age in the UK. So that's a huge swathe of the population who will be forced to get a digital ID. There are also millions of people who are living in poverty, who are digitally excluded, who might also be looking for work. And it feels quite counterintuitive for a government that's trying to encourage people into employment to be introducing something that could ultimately end up being a significant barrier.
I mean, if it's mandated, Alys, Ruth has a great point here that actually it could stop people from being able to get a job.
I think that's unlikely. I mean, I think you could solve, these are wrinkles with the policy that you could figure out.
And quite a big wrinkle.
I think, but what would be the real advantage here is it would also stop people being able to work illegally, which is a huge pull for illegal migrations and small boats. And I think it could really help solve that problem, which is such a strain on our society at the moment.
But hold on, presumably, Ruth, you would say we've got national insurance numbers that you have to give if you want to get a job to work here legally. And why doesn't that work?
Yeah, this is kind of one of the criticisms that we mean when we talk about it being touted as a silver bullet. So employers already face huge fines if they employ someone who doesn't have the right to work. So employers are carrying out those right to work checks because they want to avoid the fines. And if they're not, having yet another ID system is not going to deter them. So those employers who are willing to hire people who don't have the right to work and risk that fine, this is just yet another system that they can ignore.
Okay, Ruth, stay with us. I'm going to go to the calls now and see how our viewers at home feel about these digital IDs. Stephen from London, are you happy to get one?
Hello, Storm. Welcome back. Good to see you.
Thanks. What's your thoughts on digital IDs?
I think it's ridiculous. It's unacceptable. Why should we have a digital ID card? Who's going to pay for it? Me or people or the government?
Well, the government seems to think that they'll save money on this, presumably. But yes, the outlay of it could be very expensive. But what's your problem with the government having your information in one place where it's easier for you and them to access?
Yes, Storm. I'll say if you lose your digital ID card or whatever, someone can get access to your personal details.
I mean, crucially, I think it would be harder to lose something when it is digital than if it is just a hard print papers or an actual card. They're far more easy to use. And I suppose their argument is that this is going to reduce the amount of fraud that happens, Stephen. But I appreciate people's gut reaction to this is that they just don't like it. Thank you for your call. Charles from Essex, are you the same? Do you just not like the sounds of this?
I'm sorry, Storm, but before I say, I definitely don't like it. Before I say my point, I just want to respond to the things that you've said, you and the other lady on the panel. First of all, on the topic of people working illegally, the shadow economy is based out of people who work without documents anyway. Yes. They get paid in things like cash, or they get paid in not even cash, like trade, like one person does something for one, another person does something for another. So how a digital ID is going to stop that is ridiculous. If anything, it will push more people to get into that because they won't be able to get a digital ID. So they'll be more likely to choose the shadow economy. And as for it being more simple to use a digital ID, how can anything be more simple than a physical card that you have on you? Like a passport, driver's license. How someone wants to know if I'm British, they ask me for a passport, a driver's license, a bill. All of these things have worked completely fine for decades before. And suddenly it's complicated to use these. It boggles the mind.
Well, I mean, crucially, you can lose your passport and you can lose your driver's licence. But it is a fair point. Why do we need a digital ID when we have all these IDs?
Well, so as far as I understand it, the argument is that when an employer checks the digital ID, it will go, the central database will know that check has happened. Whereas now it's just the case that the employer has to put the passport in the photocopying machine.
So this is crucially just to try and stop people who are working here illegally from working.
Well, I mean, that's what Keir Starmer has said is the key motivation for it. I mean, as Ruth says, the argument as to why this is a good idea does keep changing. I don't necessarily think that's a reason to say, well, let's throw away the whole thing. That just means that we maybe want to be a bit clearer about why we're doing this.
Charles, what if it's sort of deeper than that? It's a bigger picture than that, Charles. Actually, having everyone's information in one place makes it easier for the government to create policy and put funding where funding is needed.
It's very similar to the cashless society thing. It's not that people who are against cashless, having a cashless society don't like using cards. Like, I use a card, I use my phone to pay for things, but I also like to have the option of cash. So it's the same thing with this. If you didn't, it's like the previous caller just said, the guy from London. He said, if I don't have the digital ID, like I lose it or something, now I can't function. Whereas if you have both, then and you have it as a choice for people to use which one they want, then use whichever one you want to use.
Okay, so you're happy for a choice, Charles?
How is it secure? How is it secure to have all your personal information in one single place? That's the opposite of digital security. It's better to have them separated so that if one of them is compromised, not all of them are. That's like 101 of security.
Okay,
Everything
Charles.
they say.
All right, thank you very much. We've got Adrian from Oxfordshire. What's your thoughts on this?
Oh, yes, hello. Before you start talking about my accent, yes, I am Swiss by origin, and there we have identity cards.
Yes.
Just the referendum coming up at the end of the month is about, is it going to be digitalized? It will go through swimmingly because it is so incredibly useful. I also have still one foot in Belgium, in Brussels, where I worked for a bit, and there I have an identity card which has une puce. What's that? You know, sorry, the word in English I can't think of. But anyhow, it has a bit on it which is like on a bank card or so. It has everything stored in it.
Like a chip.
And that's what did you say in English?
A chip? Is that what you're referring to? A chip in the card?
It has an electronic
Yes.
a bit on it.
Band, maybe, a strip.
A strip, okay. And I find it incredibly useful. In fact, I'm talking in Switzerland about this because wherever I go, and I'm now thinking of I have to go and see a doctor or whilst on this subject like pharmacy, they have access to all my files, everything.
Well,
just because
Adrian,
I have this card.
That's a really interesting point, and the fact you're so pro that is interesting because Ruth, on the other hand, you would be slightly concerned about that, wouldn't you?
So I think the key thing here is that for some people, this is a useful system. Some people live their lives on their phone. I know that I'm one of them, but I know that my grandmother isn't. And for her, it would be extremely difficult to be reliant on any kind of digital ID system. So I think that opt-in question is really important here. And then the other thing I would just flag on that is that there are serious cybersecurity risks, which Alys touched upon, but the National Cybersecurity Centre has itself said that in the past year, there's been a 50% increase in cybersecurity risks like hacks. Alys also touched on some of the private companies that have faced hacks recently, the Jaguar Land Rover being an example, that cost the British economy nearly £2 billion. So there's the cost element of the risk, but then there's also that personal element of that's a whole lot of data to be held in one space. And it looks like the system is going to be kind of held based on the government's one login system, which has been criticised by the National Cybersecurity Centre for weaknesses in the system in 2023, which as of May this year still hadn't been resolved. So it makes me feel concerned about how my very personal data will be stored securely.
Yeah, Michael, I'm really surprised that you're so happy to give your information out so freely to the government. Are you not worried about hacks, just at a sort of very basic level?
Well, I mean, I'm not qualified to have strong opinions about hacks. I was reading something that was suggesting that sort of we can have these where there aren't sort of our data all stored in one place because of sort of peer-to-peer technology. But I have to admit, I'm not an expert there. I suppose my feelings is that this data is already out there anyway. And in terms of the NHS, there were these same concerns about that. But I really like having my NHS online login, and I'm not that fussed about sort of my data being on it. I'll choose convenience.
I recently used the NHS quite extensively, and I have about 3 different logins, and I can't work out where I have to go for what information. So I need someone to give me some sort of tutorage on that. But
or someone to give you a single digital ID card.
Or, well, there you go, perhaps. Listen, Ruth, thank you very much for speaking to us. We now want your calls on something completely different.